Okay, so continuing right off of the last patch, one thing that I kind of wanted to pitch towards you all is that you're not just conformed to very basic waveforms. In fact, what we could do with a lot of this stuff is something interesting like creating a wavetable. So we can turn this off, turn this on, and go into something like this. Same thing with this guy, we can use two different wavetables, and from my knowledge, even with this, it might be interesting to explore because if you already have a weirdly shaped wavetable, imagine if you're using an asymmetric wavetable and then you have another asymmetric wavetable, then you can kind of see how far along the rabbit hole you can get into. That would require a little bit of resampling. Maybe we can cover that another time, but for now, let's just pull up, I don't know, some kind of wavetable maybe from the latest preset pack. So that's more so like a sine wave. That seems pretty complicated. Now let's do the same thing on this one. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, sure. So we're going to detune this by a pretty hefty amount. Same thing on this one. Detune this by a pretty hefty amount. We're going to turn off the saw wave. And now what we're going to be able to have is a finer means of control with this as well. Because now, like, what we could essentially do is, yeah, that's really interesting, is we can also change the wavetable over time. And the reason why this becomes interesting is because it means that it's another dimension of morphing, if you will, to the initial chain. And that's really why I like doing this stuff so much, is because it's not just going to be the same thing per se. I'm just going to use the same modulator and turn this down, so now these two should be like polar opposite of each other, because it's not really like, it doesn't really matter what it is that we're doing. But if you take a listen now, the waveforms are constantly shifting, and that's a really interesting thing, because if we were to turn these back on, let's see if it changes the sound at all. It does. It's a little crazy, but maybe if we were to kind of turn this on and get into the multipass chain on this, so we pull this back up. Yeah, pretty sick. So because of this, there's really an endless world of possibilities with just setting up one particular preset and changing this out. Now, if we wanted to take this a step further, something else that we could do is introduce an element of FM. And I'm only laughing to myself because I'm like, man, there's so much that we can kind of pull in with this. And really, like, it's crazy because this isn't much different than what we would normally be doing. But you know, just from the fact that now we're separating the top and bottom of the waveform independently just means that it might allude to more interesting sounds. So if we were to add FM to this or even randomize this, now we can essentially FM one side of the waveform, right? And I don't know if you noticed or not, but this kind of created like a more metallic sound through this just by having a touch of FM. Now, who's to say that, you know, we don't do something different, maybe like with a sine wave or something, or maybe even within this group, we can also add a harmonic. So now this side is being FM'd, and now on this side, we're adding in an extra harmonic on this to like completely change the waveform at the very beginning. Now, I do think that this in particular has kind of morphed itself beyond like what we can recognize because of how much processing is in there. But even still, if we were to pull back on the mix of all these and stuff, and I would do this stuff at the beginning, we can kind of maybe just get a feel for what's actually happening. So let's go ahead and pull off of the FM. So right now it's kind of difficult to tell because we're using complicated waveforms, but they are reminiscent of what it is that we're using here. And so, yeah, it just creates some really interesting possibilities for us to work with. So in the next video, I'm going to turn all this stuff back on, but in the next video, we will process some of this into a means of audio, and then I'll show you how to get more out of your patch just from resampling back into itself, which becomes a whole different thing.